my name is Helen Mira, and I live in Pleasantville, Westchester County. I am chair of the Conservation Council in Pleasantville. I am a Westchester Master Composter and Recycler, which was a class I took at Sheldrake, and I'm on the recycling committee in town. And one of the things I do in all of those capacities is teach and practice composting of food waste.
Why would we want to compost our own food waste?
Food waste makes up a huge portion of our trash, and here in Westchester County, and I believe in Harrison because you also use the county facilities, like in Pleasantville, our trash gets hauled up to Peekskill to a place called the Wheelabrator at Charles Point, and at the Wheelabrator all our trash is burned. Burning trash is an interesting way of dealing with trash. It's a waste to energy plant, so the energy created from burning the trash is actually converted into electricity through steam turbines. However, food waste is actually pretty wet, so it's not a great fuel for a Wheelabrator. In addition to that, food waste could be recycled into our environment. One of our problems today is we have poor soils, and using food waste to make compost can improve our soils.
How long have you been doing this type of work?
Oh, that's a bit tricky. Probably at least 10 years. But I have to admit, when I was a kid, people composted. They composted yard waste, which we call garden waste in England. And I didn't really think about it. It just happened. And then kind of in my 20s and 30s, I didn't have a garden. I didn't really deal with anything like that. And I sort of became more aware after I had children that there was more to life than, just whatever I did day to day and just work and so on. So I became more interested in the environment. I think I've always been interested in it, but more active in working in it.
How does your work benefit the community?
I think teaching in schools is the most productive, but when we, another event I'm involved with, I'm a co-chair of a music festival, a piece of a music festival in Pleasantville. We have a music festival coming up on July 8th, and 6 years ago we started a zero waste program. And zero waste is an attempt to prevent anything from going in the trash. So we have waste stations throughout the music festival, which we have help attendees separate recycling from food waste, compostable waste that is, and trash. And that's an opportunity then to educate people, many of whom are Pleasantville residents, and we do get quite a bit of feedback, people more interested in composting. In addition, our village composts leaf waste, which I believe is also true here in Harrison, where yard waste is hauled off and turned into if it's leaves, it's turned into compost, and if it's branches and small twigs, it gets turned into mulch.
Can you give us an example of how we can compost?
This is just an example of the things that can go into your food, into your compost bin at home. Paper towels, I don't know if you can recognize these things. This is a coffee filter and coffee grounds, eggshells, carrots, I have a corn cob here, bread, as long as it doesn't have oils like peanut butter or butter, margarine, or cheeses or dairy or meat or bones, fish, none of that goes in, no animal waste. This is very what we call nitrogen heavy or green, and we need to add compost to make carbon heavy things such as leaves or sawdust or shredded newspaper to make a nice balance of chemicals to make good compost. So this is actually 4 different things in here. These are the leaves. I rake all my leaves and save them in a big pile near my compost bin, and every time I throw food waste in, I throw in a huge handful of leaves. You really need many times more many leaves than food waste, because these are, even though they're bulky, they're very lightweight and there's not so much carbon in just a small handful. Another way to do it is with worms, and they're special worms. They're called red wiggler worms. They're European, like me. So in this worm condo, you see there's a little, it's down there. We have damp newspaper on the top just to keep the moisture in. And if you peel that back, if you could tip that a little bit, I shall find some worms for you. Here we go.
Okay.
So this is a red wiggler worm. And they're about 16, is that the right number? I think it's 16,000 worms in about a pound of worms.
Wow.
And worms eat about half their weight a day. So if you have a pound of worms, they're going to eat about half a pound of food scraps. And a lot of us generate a lot more than that, but worms then double in number. I think it's about double every month, maybe every 3 weeks, something like that.
So once you have them, you don't have to breed anymore or buy any more. They're going to take care of themselves.
Right. In fact, I think you have to separate them because you have so many after a while. This little condo setup has a drain at the bottom, and we'll call it worm tea, compost tea. It's very useful for houseplants or even on your garden. So it's a great setup if you're indoors, and you can do this year round.
If everyone made an effort, do you think we can make a difference in the environment in 20 years?
So if we can compost more, we can save electricity, we can drive less, we can buy less packaging. There's a whole, not new, but to go back the old way of thinking where everything had a value. Then in 20 years, I think we could actually turn the clock back a little bit in terms of our carbon emissions and so on, and improving our soils with compost, and for our own, as a society, our own understanding of how lucky we are to have this world that gives us so many riches in terms of, what we can eat, how we can live. Drinking water is so important. I do think at a home that we can be mindful and pay attention, and that way you start to see that when you go out that you could help others also think differently about how we live. I think we can all help our friends understand that we all need to try harder to waste less.
Hi, my name is Miriam Paz, and I founded a company called Down to Earth Markets. I started the company in 1991, so we are in our 26th year. We organize farmers markets, and we started our first market in Ossining, New York. Now we have about 18 markets in Manhattan, Queens, Brooklyn, and parts of Westchester and Rockland County.
Why are farmers markets a good thing?
It's important that everyone has an opportunity to buy from the local farmers. It's important to have farming that is close to all of the areas of the city, the Westchester area, so people can have access to the freshest produce. And we think that it's a good thing that people are able to interact with the people that make their food.
How long have you been working with farmers markets?
I had started a food co-op in about 1990, and it took a lot of work, the food co-op, and I said, well, maybe it's easier to run a farmer's market. So I asked the village elders if I could start a market, and after a lot of investigation, I assured them that this would be a good thing. So we started in 1991, so that's a long time.
What do you think is important about your work with the farmers market?
What I find important about the work is that it creates a sense of community wherever there's a farmer's market. And that was one of the reasons I started the market in the first place. I started it in a downtown that was very sleepy and nobody was coming to the stores, and I said maybe we could enliven things up. And I know that people like to interact with, to look at the food that they're buying and to say, how did you grow this, or where did it come from? So I used it as a way of getting people engaged in their local community. That was important to me.
Have you noticed a result of your efforts?
The results are that when I started, there were only 2 farmers markets in Westchester, Yonkers and New Rochelle. Now almost every town has them, and most villages look at it as an amenity, so that if somebody is coming from the city, where they're used to the markets, they'll say, oh, I'm going to go live in a community that has a farmer's market. So it's become very popular and a challenge, because as more and more markets begin, it does cut up the pie a little bit, and everybody wants their community to go to their market. So that's challenging.
Do farmers markets have a positive impact on local farms?
There has been, I think, an incredible impact on the farms, because what happened often, like let's say when the New York Thruway was built many years ago, people used to drive up to the country to the farms, to the farm stands, and when the Thruway was built, it completely cut them off from their main customer base. So the farmers markets, when they came in, were a savior for many of the farms. So it has been a huge impact. There is a movement now with young people who get college degrees, they get their masters, they get very highly educated, and then they decide they want to become farmers. So there is a group of millennials that feel that farming would be for them, even though they have no background in the field. Their parents were not farmers. So there is a big shift. We feel that the young people, as long as they're educated young and tell their parents, I want to go to the farmer's market. Of course they have to like vegetables, but who doesn't like a fresh tomato or corn? And you can get used to broccoli.
My name is Danielle Colby. I live here in Harrison. I'm a mom of 2 little boys who are 5 and 7. And I work out in the community to help families eat better and grow their own food with this called the Tower Garden.
Do you think your work with Tower Gardens helps the environment?
When you're able to grow your own food in something like the Tower Garden, which is a vertical aeroponic growing system, which means you're growing your plants in an air or mist environment without using any soil. You're using less resources. You're not, digging into the ground. You're growing above the ground and you're growing up. So you're not using space. So it's really helping to alleviate the overuse of resources. And you're growing locally. You can grow right in your own backyard or here in your own library.
When and why did you decide to do this work?
I decided to do this work about 3 years ago, although I've always had an interest in being conservative with our resources and trying to do what I can with the environment. I was introduced to the Tower Gardens about 3 years ago, and it immediately made sense to me. I thought it was really cool to be able to grow our own produce without using any dirt in very little space. And so we've been growing at home with our family for about 3 years, and I've been helping other families and communities grow their own produce as well.
Can you save money by growing your own food in a Tower Garden?
You can absolutely save money by growing your own produce in a Tower Garden. Because if you can see here, in this Tower Garden, you can grow 28 different plants. You can grow your lettuce, your herbs. We have string beans on the bottom, eggplant, peppers, whatever you like to eat. So if you're growing it at home, you don't have to go to the grocery store and buy it. And you can start right from seeds. And a little packet of seed costs less than $2. And you can probably get about, for lettuce for example, maybe 20 different pods of lettuce out of one packet of seeds, versus going to the grocery store and sometimes paying $5 or more for some lettuce. So you can absolutely save money.
If everyone made an effort, do you think we can make a difference in the environment in 20 years?
If everybody starts doing just a little bit in their part to help conserve our resources, to grow your own food, we can absolutely make a really big impact in our communities and globally. So if everyone was growing in a Tower Garden, we'd be using less resources. And as you can see, you're growing vertically, so you can grow up. For example, a lot of restaurants in California, where we know California is usually in a state of a drought because they don't get a lot of rain. What these restaurants are doing is they're actually putting Tower Gardens on top of rooftop spaces. So they're using 90% less water than traditional gardening. They're getting fresh produce for their customers in their restaurant, and because they're growing green right there, they're helping to clean the air as well. So you can imagine if all of our restaurants did that, or if everybody in their home started growing their own produce, it could really make a significant impact.
I'm Amy Benroff. I live in Harrison. I am a mom. I have 2 daughters, and I am a local farmer, and I grow food for food pantries and soup kitchens in Westchester County.
What does being a local farmer mean to you?
Oh, that's a hard question. It means like being in touch with the seasons and with nature. It means working in the dirt. It means saving seeds and watching things grow and trying to take care of them, and dealing with wildlife that also like to eat your vegetables. There's a lot of things, yeah.
How large is your farm?
So I work in 5 gardens that are different sizes. 2 of them are about 1 acre. One of them is almost 4 acres or 4.5, and then 2 other ones are a little smaller than probably than 1 acre.
So you actually go to different locations to grow different things?
Yes. Well, pretty much everything is grown in all the locations, but it started as one small garden that expanded, and then it just has been growing since then. So other locations have been, land has been given to other locations for food to grow.
When did you start this farm?
10 years ago. I'd started. It was in response to a local farmer in Greenwich on King Street who, his name was Farmer Dell, and he had a farm, and I used to go there and buy vegetables from him, and he would always talk about how he was having trouble keeping his farm going because he couldn't make the mortgage payments. And so I investigated a little bit with him, and I tried to help him and come up with some ideas about bringing more business to the farm, but realized that there was a lot of debt on the property and it would have been very difficult. So I went to my dad and uncle's office, which was around the corner, and they had a big lawn area, and I asked them if I could convert some of that into food production, because I wanted to do something in response to losing this big farm that was down the street. So that's how it started.
Is selling food in the community from local farms good for the environment?
Absolutely. The more you learn about commercialized industrial farming, the more you see how destructive it is to the environment. So local farming and local food production is one way to address and to start to change some of the problems with the way we grow food in a large scale. We're not shipping things across vast distances, so you're not using a lot of fuel to distribute foods. The way that food is grown, locally we have very biodiverse gardens, and so lots of things are grown in a small space. In industrialized farming, you have thousands of acres of the same thing, of monocrops they call it, and so when you have thousands of acres of the same thing growing, things become more vulnerable to pests, and farmers tend to have to use more and more pesticides and more herbicides. And then there's a whole other issue with the honeybees, which are very important. And so we rely on the bees to pollinate our plants, which give us fruits and vegetables, and without them, we don't have them. And so when you grow thousands of acres of the same plant, it flowers for a very short window of the growing season, and that's when the bees get their food. And then there's nothing for them to eat the rest of the year, so they can't really survive. So when you have smaller local gardens and farms, they can diversify their crops, they can pay attention to feeding the bees and taking care of the bees locally. They can do it with less destructive practices.
In the next 20 years, what do you think will happen if more communities buy food from local farms and gardens?
I think it would be tremendous. We have something in our culture called food deserts, where there are, even though there's an abundance of food, the way we distribute it is unjust, basically, for lack of a better word. Some people have access to abundance and plenty and waste and throw out a lot of food, and then there are people who don't have access to any fresh vegetables or fruits at all in the vicinity where they live. So one way to address that would be to grow locally, so that all communities have access to somebody who's producing food locally. The nutritional value of it is high. There's more. The freshness. There's a lot of benefits to getting something that just comes locally. It's not going to be sprayed with preservative. There's a whole lot of things, and so I think that health would improve. I think people's health would improve. I think people's well-being would improve. I think their stress would be reduced. I think there's a lot of power in knowing where your food comes from. People would feel more empowered in growing your own food. There's something that is a very innate and kind of natural human aspect to it, I think.
What advice would you like to give to the youth of today about the environment?
One of the things is that I always like to say is that the laws of nature are the laws of abundance, and the law of nature is that nature is always very giving and very generous, and so it's important not to take advantage of that, but to try to live in harmony with that. So for example, you take one seed and you plant it in the ground and you take care of it, and the plant grows and gives you thousands more, hundreds more, thousands more seeds. And so then you take care of those and you get, thousands and thousands of more. And so I think sometimes in the way that we live as people on the earth, we don't live in that kind of generosity. And so I think that it's an important lesson to learn from the environment.